We're going to go back to the University of Cape Coast, and this time our roving man taking his roving all the way to Cape Coast this morning. Usually around this time, you'd find Roland Walker and, on a few occasions, perhaps me, engaging, our MPs and other officials. But we thought, let's take talk and the national conversations to young people. And we thought campus of the University of Cape Coast will be a very good destination. So Maxwell is engaging some young people, about 4 of them, all students at the University of Cape Coast. They're talking about what has been making buzz in terms of the number of presidential staffers, the people that work for the president, if you like, that number. Also recent clashes at the University of Ghana, Legon. Remember those clashes? Well, the University of Cape Coast also had its share, sadly ended with somebody being crippled in the process. So they will start with that, talk about the staffers situation, and they will end with UK Prime Minister who decided to touch on a certain subject and generate a whole conversation again with this gay LGBT laws, and saying that she would assist us if we want to change our laws. So over to you, Maxwell Agbagba, and your guest from the University of Cape Coast.
Thank you very much, Mama V. So we are currently on another part of the University of Cape Coast campus, and we're very excited to have with us the creme de la creme here at the University of Cape Coast to talk about, very topical issues that concern them as young people. Because if you're talking about homosexuality, for instance, if you're talking about violent clashes, for instance, the core of the people that you find engaged in these activities, unfortunately, are young people, are the youth. So today we are bringing a conversation to them, find out from them what their perspective are, and also know what they think about some of these issues. I have with me here Tunde Awosika. He's the Speaker of Parliament for the University of Cape Coast. I also have here with me Mamiefua McLean, who is actually a student of the University of Cape Coast Medical School. I also have with me here my good friend Milo. Yes, Milo Dazi. Milo Dazi is a student here at the UCC. I also have Caleb Dazi, who is the president of the University of Cape Coast Debate Society. Now, without much ado, let's set the conversation rolling, starting with violent clashes on our various university campuses. And Mama, as you rightly mentioned, just some days ago, we heard of the unfortunate incident at the University of Ghana campus. The video went viral. I mean, we saw students brutalizing another university student, use a scissors, cut off his hair, hit him many times. UCC, they've had their own share of this in 2017, that clashes between, some students believed to be from the University of Ghana, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ogwa Hall, and then the ATL. Today, we are here to find out from them what exactly they think is the cause of, violent clashes on our university campuses. Let me start off with you, Tunde, Speaker of Parliament for the UCC campus.
Maxwell, I thought we agreed ladies first. That notwithstanding, let me just say that I feel the popular notion there, usually when we have some of these clashes, is the male-dominated halls that are engaged in this. So then the solution we ascribe is that let's try and infiltrate this male-dominated hall and then turn them into mixed halls, and that could be a solution. But we've realized even in UCC, ATL Hall, Atlantic Hall, is a mixed hall. But they engage Casford, which is male-dominated hall. So we then realize that infiltrating or turning them, the male-dominated halls into mixed hall is not the solution. And I must say that I belong to one of the factions because I'm a Casfordian, a red-blooded gentleman without apology. I however feel that let's provide alternative ways where these guys will channel their energy into, so that the supremacy that we engage in with physicality, possibly, why don't we engage in supremacy of the brain? Debate, as Caleb Tabel is the president of the Debate Society, let's engage in intellectual banter. You claim you are superissimo, we claim we are superpowers. Let's meet, let's see who has it up there. So let's provide those alternatives rather than, because if we leave them into some of this, then I also think that sometimes the suppression, because when you suppress people so much, they explode. Yes, when this, I mean, those that are into science will tell you, even when you want to create bombs and the like, you must suppress certain electron into certain nucleus and the likes. I left my science in SHS, so, but when you do that, I mean, that is when you can get the explosion. So let's try and engage these people. They are human beings, they are not animals. The students engaging in this, so let's engage them. I believe they will reason along as well.
Interested. In fact, I've heard that assertion about converting some of these single-sex halls into mixed halls. I mean, at the start of this semester, we heard something like that was in the offing at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Katanga to be specific, but we do not know what happened to that. Mami, there are some people who think that is a lazy approach to dealing, with the problem, converting this male single-sex halls to, to mixed halls. What do you make of that?
I actually agree with what he said, because if you should think about it, I was of the point of view that it's probably sycophancy, but then they made me understand that probably it's more like radicalization of the students as compared to sycophancy. So bringing females in, it's more of a mind thing as compared to the various individuals in place. So I actually believe that if we could look at the whole ideology as to they thinking they are supreme, they are better than this person or that person, and then we channel that into more intellectuals, we would be able to solve that problem.
Wow. Mami Efua actually talked about radicalization, and I think tied to that also is indoctrination. What people are made to believe the very first time they step into, some of these halls. Because, I mean, I don't believe that when they were in SHS, they were reading about some of these halls and they saw some of the things that they've been doing. So they get to this halls and they think that, okay, we've also attained this status. So why not assume that particular, cloak that they've been, wearing?
Yeah, and I think that's very true. But then you see, I feel our failure to solve this issue has to do with those who are solving the issue, and then, like she said, the radicalization. But these guys from level 100 are told, when you see someone from this other hall, it's not your friend. These people have done this to us in the past. They've caused the rustication of our fellows and the rest. And so these students have that mindset, so they are emotionally charged. So when they see students from other halls, then these guys explode, like you will say, and then attack them. And then again, those who are to solve these issues, let's say the vice chancellors, the dean of students, were once students of these halls, and they have at a point been indoctrinated to some extent. And so how can they even solve the problem to begin with? And then they must offer solidarity to their fellow hallers, and so it becomes very difficult. I think it's a complex thing. The only thing in my view, is to break the ideology that no hall is superior than any other hall, and you don't try to give them martyrs by sacking people, by letting people go on suspension and the rest. These people fuel the narrative that these people are against us and this is the problem. So I feel it's a more complex issue.
That's interesting. So you are saying that by suspending these people, by rusticating them, we are creating martyrs of a sort, and people would see these people as, okay, so these are the people who died for the hall, and they would accord them so much respect.
I agree.
Otabo, you agree?
I agree with him perfectly, Maxwell. I believe that when it comes to solving this issue, we need to tackle the issue at its root cause. And at its root cause is a certain hall identity that has been fueled mostly by a certain ideology of superiority, as the Right Honorable said. And this is very important because when these people are moving out to cause harm and to cause violence, they usually do so with the intent of maintaining a certain kind of dominance over their superiors. So I would like to lean into the view that you need to introduce more healthier ways of hall rivalry, because when you rusticate these people, then you are basically giving them, as Milo said, martyrs. You are basically giving them more reason to engage in this, because these people will have been seen as soldiers for the right, soldiers who were partaking in something that was really good, and then the school is punishing them for doing that. So I believe that to a large extent, this ways of solving the issues by just rusticating them will not solve the issues. Of course, if you introduce healthier forms of rivalry like inter-hall debate championships, like inter-hall sporting championships, still, we may still have certain violent clashes. But then those violences will not be a first course, but they'll just be an after effect. And that is how we need to move the rhetoric from. We need to move the violence from being as it were, the first cause to being just an effect of something peaceful, and then we can deal with it in that manner. We need to alienate the ideology from the violence, and the way to do that will be to engage in healthier forms of hall rivalry.
Interesting. Just before we wrap up on this particular topic, I'm sure, I mean, when you were all coming to the University of Cape Coast, I'm sure you admired the friendliness in those halls. You admired the solidarity. You admired the camaraderie in those halls, which are quite non-existent in some of the traditional halls. I mean, when I was entering University of Ghana, I wanted to be at Commonwealth Hall. I was not there, so I mean, I took a back seat. I'm sure you also dreamt of being in Casford, in Kingsley Hayford?
Well, my case is a bit different. Okay. I came on campus. I visited campus 2 years before I gained admission. Okay. And the one I came to told me, if you gain admission into UCC, one who I don't want you to go is Casford. Okay. So I programmed my mind, I don't want Casford. But as we believe in Casford, that the people that enter Casford are chosen ones. So I was chosen to be a fellow, and I entered there. And I love.
Chosen by who?
Yes, Father Casford. That is what. That is what.
Come on, so is Father Baku's there. Okay.
Yes, yeah, Father Casford. So that is what we believe. But let me quickly say that to some extent, I want to differ in opinion with what my brother Milo, said. I feel that to some extent. Instead of we saying that, well, let's not rusticate them. Because there must be that punitive measure as well. So we look at methods of deterrence. Because if you leave them on campus, then it will be like, oh, you know how our guys behave. Oh, they can't do anything after. Or what would they do to you? Still be here on campus. So even if you leave them, there's that incentive to want to continue. So for me, I feel, especially when somebody has engaged in criminal acts like stabbing somebody, that is criminal offense. And so in that regard,
we hear the gentleman who was stabbed is still bedridden right now, even as we speak.
Yes, that's what we've heard. And so there must be that deterrent factor, because when that happens, it breaks a lot of people down. And we can say it on authority. Even in Casford, when that thing happened and people were rusticated, some I think a semester or a year ago, it calmed things down. It calmed things down. So I think that deterrent factor must be there. However, that other aspect where we want to suppress the people and all that, I think we should engage in more consensus. So let's meet the guys, and I believe they will reason.
Quick question. Mami, for which hall you wanted to be in before you came to UCC?
None of them.
None of them? Is it because you're a medical student?
No. But then SRC, superannuation, PSI, yes.
Okay.
Traditional.
Okay. Milo, which hall? You wanted to be a Casfordian. I can see from your face.
I don't know. I wanted to be a little holler.
What about you, Caleb?
I'm a Casfordian.
Okay.
Yes, so I definitely like Father Casford. I love the Castle Hayford Empire. But then in closing, I would also like to say that a lot of the way we treat these people, Maxwell, to an extent, has been to criminalize them and then make them look like they are to blame for this issue. As I said before, it's a whole ideology. If we tackle that at the root, then we can solve all of this issue. Of course, to the extent that people have caused criminal acts, we need to punish them for it. But then what I'm talking about is large forms of punitive measures that are given to people who have not engaged in anything that is up to the level of a criminal act. So for example, people go on marches, let's say for example, they destroy a few items and then they are rusticated for it. To that extent where we cannot prove a criminal act, if we then decide to rusticate these people or to dismiss them, they will simply be creating martyrs. And remember that we do not have a very strict security system around here, especially in the University of Cape Coast. So these people come back and they still manage to indoctrinate the people who are coming into the halls. So we need to establish a system whereby we make everything open and then we have a society that is self-corrupting, so that instead of simply creating a we against them system, we create a system which can name and shame these people and tell them that violence isn't part of our ideology. We are superior, but that is not the way we go about it. And I feel that that is a long step in solving the whole issue of hall rivalry.
Interesting. Reminds me of the Greater Accra Regional SRC motto, emancipation of students through dialogue and a philosophy of non-violence. I think that's what we should all, be preaching. But quick to our next issue is homosexuality. A lot of times you wouldn't find people above 40, 50, 60 openly displaying their sexuality, but you find people within our age group, our generation, openly displaying their sexuality. And then, because of course, that is a time when sexually you are, exuberant, I should say, around the time. Now, there's been a lot of talk about decriminalizing homosexuality in a lot of, Commonwealth countries. It came up at the Commonwealth head of government's meetings some days ago. In fact, before Theresa May gave that speech, there was a pressure group pushing for Theresa May, for UK to actually apologize for introducing what they describe as homophobic laws into their, colonies. Theresa May actually apologized and went further to say that they are going to help those African countries to decriminalize homosexuality. As young people, let me start off with you, Mami Yefua. When we talk about homosexuality, decriminalizing it, the fact that we've made it illegal such that people can be punished for it. Do you think people should be punished for their sexuality?
You see, I think the problem starts with the fact that Ghana, as it is, or most African countries, are more religious as compared to being open-minded concerning those things. So then we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have traditionalists, and the sorts. And these people tend to, relate to their good books as compared. So in their good books, they've seen their God punish people because of that. So then it translates into the laws that we have now. So for me, I think decriminalizing it would not sit well necessarily with some people, because some of them would be like, why is this sin said to be bigger than that sin? Well, we've talked about it, and Milo believes that it should be more of a demeanor as compared to being a crime. But I believe that, if someone murders somebody, it should be the same as someone. Because believe me, if someone is sleeping with an animal, it looks weird to you.
That's speciality.
Yes, it looks weird to you. So then definitely it looks weird to another person for something which is said to be unnatural to be happening before you. So I actually think decriminalizing it, no, it is a criminal act.
Wow. Now, monitoring the Western media space, sometimes you get the sense that there's a deliberate, there's an agenda to push issues of homosexuality, to push for the legalization of homosexuality. Let me find out from you, Speaker Tunde Awosika. Do you get that sense? These are what people are saying, that they get a sense that the Western media is trying to push an agenda for the legalization of, homosexuality, especially in African countries.
Maxwell, it's very important we call a spade, and that is what it is. They're actually pushing an agenda.
You don't have to call it a big spoon, it's a spade.
Yes, and so I agree with the Ugandan president, Museveni, when he said that this is social imperialism, and that is what it looks like. We have advanced from the normal imperialism that we know, and now we are entering into social imperialism, and that is what is happening. We must establish the basis. The Ugandan deputy president in 2015, Ruto, said that homosexuality in Kenya, and for that matter Africa, is alien mannerism, and I agree with him perfectly well. We must establish that in African settings, homosexuality is alien mannerism to us. However, I think that the criminalization of it is harsh. Yes, we have established the basis that it is not acceptable in Africa. But when you there must be equal punishment to the crime, and so when you criminalize it, you put it in a certain high sphere of offense. And when that happens, that is when you get this Western culture trying to come in and tell us, no, the the measure against it is so high. So let's make it a misdemeanor. Already our culture doesn't accept it. Today, if we decriminalize it in Ghana and we catch people engaged in this thing, citizens will still beat the person up. So culturally, it's not acceptable. So there's no way we also making it worse by criminalizing it and all. Let's make it a misdemeanor. To that extent, I would say that. Then I think our country need to be certain on what our stance in homosexuality is. Because when you look at the Constitutional Review Committee that was set up, when the issue of homosexuality came before them, they were indecisive. And they were like, if any issue like that should come, we should send it to the Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court make a ruling. And that brings us to what Dr. Miles Monroe once said, that I'm suspicious of democracy because democracy can turn wrong into right by vote. And that happened in the US when the Supreme Court, by 5-4 vote, made homosexuality acceptable. So the danger is also here when the Constitutional Review Committee refers us to the Supreme Court. And that means we can have the case of the US here. So I think as a nation, we should be certain. Kenya has been consistent in their stand with homosexuality. But in Ghana, you get Athamels coming and making, a profound statement that is not acceptable here. You get other governments coming and they'll be playing dilly-dally around. No, let's be certain as a nation. It is not acceptable here. It's not our priority here. But then possibly we should reduce the penalty for it.
Interesting perspective. Now let me come to you, Milo. Heterosexuals walk around. I mean, nobody would poke their noses, nobody would poke their nose into their business. Now, just consider, I've heard this argument come up that, there are some people who are homosexuals, not because they just woke up one day and said they want to be homosexuals. Their first sexual experience was actually in senior high school when they got to Form 1, and then maybe in a single-sex school. Somebody they called school father gave them a first sexual experience, and their first, orgasm was with a man and not a woman. It continued for some time. After 4 years, they got out of school, and now they cannot, get closer to women, and now they are homosexuals. For people who are not, deliberate about their sexuality, do you think it is fair to still go ahead and then punish them for something that they chose not to be, but they got into it by circumstance?
You see, that shows the complexity of the issue. That's why I would disagree with Tunde when he says it's alien to Africa. I believe society is dynamic, and then if we should trace back, there will be instances of at least 1 or 2 people who were homosexuals years back. And so it won't be fair to categorically say that it doesn't exist in Africa or it's alien to Africa. But then what I believe should be done is that we should keep an open discussion on this issue, not take a stand or not decriminalize it because we are being forced by Western powers. It should be more organic. It should come within. Let's Ghanaians discuss this issue. Let's all of us come to a consensus. Do we think it's right to decriminalize it? Do we think we should accept it in our society? Rather than being pushed down our throats by foreign powers that, decriminalize this because we feel it's wrong. Or saying it's not our culture, and so let's keep it there. When you do that, you suppress certain vulnerable groups. There could be some homosexuals in your society who, because they are not the majority, will be threatened, and their rights will be trampled on. And so, if we keep an open discussion on this issue, if we deliberate, then we can reach a consensus on this issue and see what we should take or the way forward from here.
Interesting. Well, there are some who actually say that just leave it, hanging. President Akufo-Addo mentioned in that Al Jazeera interview, and he was really criticized, for it when he said that, if the advocacy comes, when the groundswell of advocacy for the legalization, for the decriminalization, then maybe, it can happen. Should we just leave it hanging and then get to that stage when we observe a groundswell of advocacy, then we can say, okay, we have enough reason and enough ground to legalize this?
So, Maxwell, I believe this whole issue is, as I'll feed into Tunde's arguments, is a Western imposition on us. Because if you look at since the colonial times, Victorian standards of sexual behavior were imposed upon colonial systems, and we are forced to live by those standards. Now, when the Western society has decided that in their own wisdom they have far advanced and they need to reverse those issues, they then decide to impose same standards on us. So that would mean that if Africa is always constantly remolding and reshaping its laws in order to fit the Western world, we would enter into a perpetual cycle whereby the social determinants of our laws are dependent on someone else. And I do not feel that that feeds into our independence as a nation. So on the stance of decriminalizing, I think that even though criminalization may be a very harsh punishment for something that is restricted to private settings and the rest, I still believe that decriminalizing it will send a very bad signal that we do not want to send right now. Because criminalization has already set the social precedent that we do not accept homosexuality in Ghana. Decriminalizing it will be telling the West that we are open to dialogue, we are open to further slippery slopes whereby we might engage with other issues apart from homosexuality. And when you look at the whole homosexuality issue and the sort of rhetoric that has been propounded in the airspace, I believe that there are two main things. First of all, people will say that it's not really a choice by these people. They were either born that way or certain circumstances forced them into that. Then in that case, I do not see how we should then accept it as normal behavior. If any behavior is abnormal, then we should be seeking to correct it and make it conform to normal social behavior, or at least giving these people the sort of needed possibly psychological attention, depending on that logic alone. I'm not making a profound statement on that. Depending on that logic alone. Again, if we say it's an issue of choice, then again we need to feed into the rhetoric of the social capital theory, where people in a society generally agree to cede certain rights, to cede certain freedoms in order to live in a cohesive society with people. Therefore, if it's your choice and then you weren't forced into doing so, you weren't born that way, then you must understand that you live within an African context, 99.9% of whom do not like this. Therefore, that society, that choice or that behavior must be ceded in order to allow people to live in that society. I mean, we have cannibalistic societies in places like Nigeria, but we do not accept cannibalism simply because a lot of that society do not accept it. If we are going about saying that people have a right to homosexuality because they have made a choice to engage in this thing, and I believe we enter a slippery slope whereby we might at a point in time need to allow things like bestiality, things like child pornography or child sexual relationship pedophilia, and acceptance such as bestiality and cannibalism even in the long run. So I believe we do not need to decriminalize this issue. The issue of homosexuality is a very important social issue that feeds off society's disregard, discontempt for this issue. And we must understand that laws or legal provisions are made based on social norms and social values. So if the African society does not like that, then that is our law and that is what they must respect. We aren't, I'm not pushing for, as it were, persecution of homosexuals. They are human beings, they have common human rights. But as Tunde said again, decriminalizing will not improve their situation in Ghana. So I do not think
interesting perspective. Now, let's wrap up 1 minute each. I'm going to ask you your views about President Akufo-Addo's 998. Some people choose to call it 99.8. I just want to find out from you. I mean, President Akufo-Addo sometime last week presented the list of his presidential staffers, and I mean, those working at the presidency. There are those who are pushing the arguments that that number is too high. But the Minister of Information is saying that, look, in the year 2016, the budget for President Mohammed's, the staff at the presidency was 3 billion, Ghana cedis. But we have what you call huge number of workers at the presidency. But our budget is just 1.6 billion Ghana cedis. So where lies the argument? Where is the argument about huge numbers and we are all crying about this, Tunde?
Okay, so let me say that I will not call it 998 because in the face of evidence, it is uncountable. Yes, because names like Niteko and the likes were not captured in it, and there have been names that have been mentioned that were not. So at the moment, we are not aware the number of presidential staffers the president is operating. That is in the face of the fact. So the president should come out and tell us the real numbers that we have. So I would say uncountable.
I think the minority has also been pushing the same argument. They think there are more people working at the presidency.
Well, I have not listened to their perspective, but based on what I have seen or on information available, it's uncountable. So the president should come out with the real fact that we know. Again, let me say that it seems we have gotten to a time where we should limit the discretion powers of the executive arm of government, because it seems anytime we give them that space, they abuse that discretionary power. So possibly we should be thinking about putting certain limitation on the numbers. For the Minister of Information, he's doing his job. So, but then again, I disagree with him because Imani Ghana president, or I should say Money Africa, Franklin Kudjo, have made some writings, and he have said that, you know, the previous administration, John Mame's administration, came up with a certain budget, but even in the end, there was an excess expenditure. And so at the moment, we are not, yes, they budgeted, but we are not aware, in terms of 2017, what was the excess of the expenditure, even in 2017. So they should come out clear and go beyond the budget. Tell us that despite this budget that we had, how much did you spend? So let's get those facts, and then we can speak to the issue by merely coming to throw out the numbers. And I think we should go beyond the numbers and establish a principle.
Thank you very much, Tunde Awosika. He is the Speaker of the UCC Parliament. So he just had his final words, you know, on this conversation that we brought to campus. Let me hear from you, Mami Efua. 30 seconds. 998, too many?
The problem is because they are comparing it to the NDC, which was 6, 7, 8, then they tend to say that the people are too many. But I think it's more of a problem of accountability, because at the end, would the work be done? Would we be able to account for everything that was done, all the things that were purchased? So that's where I agree with him, where the money has to be seen and what is going to be used for, as compared to the number of people that are working there.
Wow, interested. Value for money is key. To Mami Efua. What about you?
I think it's the crude way our politicians behave, or the crude nature of our politics. There is lack of finesse to some of these issues. I mean, why will the presidency have 998 people? I mean, if you go to the White House, I doubt you have such numbers. And the argument shouldn't be about whether it's efficient or whether they produce the required result. I feel it won't, because with the numbers, it increases bureaucracy and makes decision taking very difficult. And the process you have to go through to get certain things done. And so I feel the numbers are just too many, and our politicians should wake up. It's crude. If you have the discretionary powers to employ people, I mean, it should be within reasonable merits or parameters, not just any numbers. And it's due to the patronage nature of our politics, again, the crude nature. And so you support a political party, and once they get into power, you are bound to get something. And these politicians owe loyalty to these people, and they have to put them somewhere. And I feel that's bad.
Okay, Otabo, I know when I give you 2 hours, you talk for 2 hours. 20 seconds.
I think this whole issue has come because of the kind of system we operate in, a supposed presidential democracy, which has been infused with too many provisions from a certain parliamentary democracy. 998, I don't think it's necessarily too much, but I believe that the issue here is because of the sort of hypocrisy we've seen from the current government, because they have earlier on in opposition criticized previous governments for having too many numbers, and they came in and then they had too many numbers. So I believe the issue here is about the hypocrisy. But then moving on, we must look at from Efua's speech how we can get accountability from the people that are working, and how we can make sure that we try to restrict the sort of discretionary powers that our presidency have. When it comes down to it, I feel that 998 may be too many. It may not be too many. But then let's look at this in this context too. All the 998 people do not work at the Flagstaff House or at the, of course, most of them work within ministries and everything. It's just the office of the government machinery. So let's not try to create that impression. I believe that we can get an efficient government even with.
Oh, Maxwell Agbagba, enjoying the conversation and going on and on and on. Our talk today coming to you live from the University of Ghana, Cape Coast. But let me just say that Maxwell Agbagba is on that trip with the Gender Committee of Parliament, and because of time, we can't have any more interactions with him. But let me just say a big thank you to our cameraman, Richard Akwa, in Cape Coast with our guys, Maxwell Agbagba and Richard Kojonyako. AM Talk coming to you live from Cape Coast this morning. I hope that you've absolutely enjoyed it.